Are you planning a trip to the U.S. anytime soon? Not at all. I won't cross the border again. Canada is our neighbor, and this isn't how you treat a neighbor. A lot of us feel the same. Canadians have just stopped going across. Border towns are falling quiet, almost frozen in place. Gas stations are closing, grocery stores are removing their signs, storage centers are empty. In many areas, that absence alone is enough to choke the entire local economy. Jobs disappear, businesses hover on the edge of collapse, and only now do we understand how much we rely on cross-border neighbors. When they stop coming, towns suffer. If once busy spots like Blaine or Niagara Falls can decline this fast, how safe is your city? Watch top 10 U.S. border towns. Struggling as Canadians stop shopping in America to see for yourself. All data here comes from real statistics and is not meant to criticize any group or person. Number 1, Blaine, Washington. Blaine, Washington is an unusual case, tiny, with no big industries or high-tech firms. But it thrived for years because of one key thing, its location next to Canada. On weekends, Canadians from Vancouver and Surrey flooded the town to buy fuel, pick up Amazon orders, grab groceries, and shop for cheaper goods. Taxes were lower and it was all nearby. Gas stations lined the streets, package shops stayed open around the clock. Blaine didn't have to innovate, just meet the needs of its northern visitors. But in 2025, the trend flipped. Political tension rose between the U.S. and Canada. New taxes hit Canadian imports. Some officials even floated symbolic ideas like turning Canada into America's fit-for state. These weren't official policies, but they aired frequently on TV and online, leaving many Canadians feeling excluded and unwelcome. Rather than protest, Canadians simply stayed away. The Buy Canadian First movement took off in British Columbia, backed by local brands and viral posts. According to the Chicago Tribune, by June 2025, vehicle crossings from British Columbia into Blaine had plunged by more than 75% in just 6 months. In a matter of weeks, 3 of the town's 5 main gas stations shut down, and over 20 package pickup centers closed for good. Blaine locals who relied on Canadian traffic for work suddenly found themselves jobless. Some tried shifting to domestic delivery services, but local demand wasn't enough. Meanwhile, Canadians stood their ground. On platforms like TikTok and Instagram, they proudly posted shopping trips to local stores, London Drugs, Canadian Tire, Save on Foods, with hashtags and captions declaring, "We don't need the U.S. anymore." Blaine, once a go-to destination, slowly faded from memory. The border ATM that used to flash and hum with activity now stands quietly, still lit, but untouched. For residents, it wasn't just the economic pain that hurt. It was the realization that their livelihood had rested on something they couldn't control. They used to think a sale or discount could bring Canadians back, but month after month, the traffic didn't return. What once felt permanent, the steady flow of Canadian shoppers, was revealed to be more fragile than anyone imagined. And Blaine isn't alone. Further northeast, cities that once sparkled with life after sunset, like Niagara Falls, are now fading. Number 2, Niagara Falls. Niagara Falls, New York in early 2025 looked very different. You no longer had to book hotel rooms months in advance. Even in peak summer, rooms sat empty, and signs offering cut-rate stays lined the roads. The flood of Ontario license plates that used to clog the streets? Gone. A city that built its identity around the power of the falls now just echoes with silence. This wasn't due to a major crisis or a downturn. It was something simpler. Canadians stopped visiting. For years, the Canadian side was seen as more picturesque, but the U.S. side drew crowds with discount shopping, late-night diners and bustling casinos. Visitors from Toronto, Hamilton, and Ottawa would cross just to enjoy a few hours, spend freely, and return. That constant flow kept the city alive. Locals never said it outright, but they all knew once the Canadian cars rolled in, business picked up. But starting in 2025, that rhythm slowed dramatically. Stats from the U.S. Bureau of Transportation show private vehicle crossings at the Rainbow Bridge down more than 60%. Compared to the same time last year, souvenir stores gathered dust, restaurants sat empty, even on weekends, and hotels kept slashing rates with little to no bookings. Some resorts had no choice but to shut down temporarily, leaving hundreds either jobless or stuck in unstable part-time gigs. Unlike smaller towns that rely on product trade, Niagara Falls depends entirely on tourism. Fewer visitors meant the city was losing its very foundation. The service sector shrunk, housing prices flatlined, even dipped in some areas close to the border. Many families struggled to keep up with everyday expenses, now worsened by inconsistent incomes. But perhaps the clearest sign of change came from the younger generation. Instead of waiting for Canadian tourists to return, many packed up and moved to bigger, U.S. cities with stable industries, not tied to the border economy. Cities like Detroit, with General Motors or Dearborn, home to Ford. Others chose Fremont, California, where Tesla's operations continue to grow. These places didn't rely on visitors. They needed skilled workers, assemblers, engineers, technicians. This quiet migration revealed something deeper. The next generation has lost faith in the old model. They no longer want to depend on forces beyond their control. While older locals still hoped for a return to the good old days, the truth in Niagara Falls became hard to ignore. This wasn't just a seasonal slump. The tourism model itself had broken. When Canadians stopped showing up, Niagara Falls stopped being a hotspot and slowly became a place people left behind. Number 3, Point Roberts. Point Roberts feels like America's forgotten back room. It's technically part of Washington State. Zip code 98281 uses U.S. dollars and abides by federal law. But to reach it from the mainland U.S., you must drive through Canada. That odd setup actually made the town appealing to hundreds of people, especially retirees. It was affordable, the weather was pleasant, and daily needs could be met with a short trip to Vancouver. Fuel, medicine, groceries, and even power and internet all flowed in from Canada. But in 2025, that access started to fade, not through outright bans, but through a slow tightening of rules. Cross-border regulations grew stricter. Special permits became harder to renew, and Canadian services gradually scaled back. They didn't shut the door, they just stopped making the town a priority. That left Point Roberts exposed. Nearly every part of its infrastructure depends on a foreign country that has no legal obligation to serve it. Unlike other border towns that count on tourism or retail, Point Roberts relies purely on connection. When Canadians stopped fueling cars, collecting packages, or filling prescriptions, the town's lifeline broke. Goods began arriving late, if at all. Doctors couldn't maintain clinics. Even basic items like milk and hygiene products grew scarce. Some families now pay for private boats from the mainland just to get supplies. With shipping unreliable, the town's only gas station now opens just 3 days a week. The post office cut its hours. Weekend cafes, once busy with Canadian customers, are closed for good. And younger generations? They're no longer choosing Point Roberts as home. For a long time, Point Roberts has had no high school, no hospital, and no stable local jobs. It was once a haven mainly for retirees or those relying on social support. But now, even they feel the pressure. Many can't sell their properties. No one wants to move to a town where every essential service depends on another country. Suspended between U.S. law and Canadian logistics, Point Roberts is caught in limbo. It lacks the population to function independently and the infrastructure to support itself. And the few remaining links to the outside world are fraying fast. Once, this was a peaceful place to retire, quiet, calm, and slow-paced. Today, that peace has shifted. It's no longer a lifestyle choice. It's isolation by default. A corner of America placed where it no longer fits. And now, when it needs to connect, no one is plugging it back in. The worrying part? Point Roberts isn't alone. More and more U.S. border towns, even those with more convenient locations, are learning a hard truth. When Canadians stop visiting, it's not just fewer customers. It's the unraveling of a way of life that people had come to depend on. Not every town is strong enough to handle that break. Number 4, Sault Ste. Marie. Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan used to be part of a daily cross-border rhythm. Canadians came like clockwork. No visas, no lengthy trips, just a quick drive across the international bridge. They'd pick up gas, fill prescriptions, shop for electronics or groceries along Ashman Avenue. They weren't loud like tourists, but consistent, dependable. Locals would often say, "We don't get tourists, we get international regulars." Now that's just a line from the past. Since March 2025, Data from the U.S. Bureau of Transportation. Statistics shows personal vehicle traffic from Ontario into the city has dropped over 57% in just 3 months. No closures, no official restrictions. Just a quiet decision made by Canadians not to come. Some stayed away due to complex border procedures. Others found better deals without leaving home. Exchange rates made U.S. shopping less attractive. And meanwhile, the Canadian side, Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario, kept growing. New shops opened. Services improved, and everything was just around the corner. With no clear benefit to crossing the bridge, most stayed put. And the American side? It began to suffocate. That sudden calm created a silence no one was ready for. A sudden emptiness followed. Downtown electronics shops began opening only a few days a week. Restaurants like Penny's Kitchen reduced staff. The family fare chain stopped ordering in bulk. A few stores stayed open but shortened their hours or switched to self-service. Across the river, though, in Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario, the story was different. Grocery stores extended hours. Outlet shops grew, and now hiring signs became common. Once like mirror images, the two cities are now drifting apart, down very different roads. For the U.S. side, it's more than just a loss in business, it's a loss in community. Those in retail, services, or local logistics now juggle 2 or 3 jobs just to stay afloat. The Michigan Association of Realtors reports that homes for sale in Chippewa County spiked over 42% in just 2 months. Some residents moved to bigger cities like Grand Rapids or Lansing, where jobs aren't tied to border activity. But many, especially older folks, have stayed, hoping the familiar faces from across the bridge will return. Sault Ste. Marie used to feel like a simple town market. Not fancy, not flashy, but enough. Now that market has lost its most loyal buyers. Stores remain lit. Employees wait behind counters. But everyone knows that if Ontario shoppers don't return, the city won't know what to depend on next. And Sault Ste. Marie isn't alone. Along the northern U.S. border, towns once seen as steady are facing a hard truth. No connection is permanent. Number 5. Calais. In Calais, Maine, just across from St. Stephen, New Brunswick, locals say something funny. Ask Canadians where their kitchen is, and they might answer, Calais. Not because of famous food, but because for years, essentials like milk, medicine, batteries, even phones and chargers were bought here. Just a short hop across the bridge. Canadians would fuel up, shop fast, maybe grab lunch, then drive home. They weren't tourists, they came out of habit. For low prices, convenience, and routine. It was like having a shared kitchen across the street. Doors always open, no second thoughts. But between March and May 2025, that changed. U.S. Customs and Border Protection data shows vehicle crossings over the Milltown and Ferry Point bridges dropped more than 64% compared to the same period last year. No bans, no announcements. Just a quiet decision. People stopped coming. Across the bridge in St. Stephen, new supermarkets opened. Services expanded and convenience grew. As Canadians stayed home, Calais began to lose its heartbeat. The decline wasn't dramatic, but slow and steady like a long winter settling in. The grocery store near the bridge started closing on more days. Family-owned diners trimmed their hours and simplified their menus. The post office got quiet. Pharmacies cut back their orders. Gone were the casual questions like, how much in Canadian? Or the quick visits for milk and hygiene products. Calais became a kitchen with only instant noodles and salt, barely enough to get by, and far from full of life. What hurt residents most wasn't just the economic dip, it was the emptiness. Elderly locals, once comforted by daily nods and smiles from northern neighbors, began to feel truly alone. Some families listed their homes, no longer waiting for Canadians to return. This wasn't a seasonal lull. It felt final. Even during summer, when things usually pick up, for sale signs multiplied. People wanted out. Few wanted in. Meanwhile, St. Stephen adapted just fine. New stores shone with bright signs. Employment ads filled windows, and shelves stayed stocked. Once harmonized, the rhythm between the two towns is now offbeat. Calais, once seen as the welcoming kitchen, is now the unused stove. Still intact, but cold and unused. If Calais shows how a town can fade when visits stop, then in Vermont, another town is fading too, but for a different reason. It's too close. A place where the line between countries isn't a wall, but a stripe on the road. Number 6, Darby Line. There are places in the world where borders aren't fences, but simple paint. Just a black stripe across pavement. Darby Line is one of them. A small Vermont town where you could sit in a library reading room on U.S. soil with your feet resting in Canada. Locals called it the soft border. For decades, it was barely there. People shared farmers' markets, attended the same churches, donated to a joint library, and grabbed breakfast at a cafe on the American side before strolling north like visiting a friend. Canadians. Canadians didn't come to Darby Line for vacations or to spend big. They came for the basics. A couple bottles of cold medicine, a loaf of cinnamon bread from the local bakery, hand sanitizer, or some kids' clothes from the discount store. Small purchases, yes, but ones that kept daily life flowing. They kept pharmacy prices competitive, supported the bilingual library, and added warmth to community events. Darby Line never aimed for major growth. It simply needed consistency. That was enough. But by early 2025, things began to shift. The steady line of cars on Church Street disappeared. The soft chime of the bakery door each Saturday faded. Familiar faces, those that didn't need greetings, stopped showing up. According to the Bureau of Border Traffic Statistics, vehicle crossings from Stansted into Darby Line fell over 66%. In just the first 3 months of the year, one of the sharpest declines along the eastern U.S. border. There was no drama, no announcements, just a quiet change. Canadians chose to stay on their side because it was easier. Prices were now similar and border rules had become too much of a hassle. And so the town that once felt naturally shared slowly slipped into separation. Shops didn't shut down overnight, but hours were reduced, inventory cut. One pharmacy stopped stocking French-labeled products. No one needed them anymore. Church pews had more empty spaces. The local meetings lost the familiar Quebecois accents. At the Haskell Library, the shelves still straddle the border, but the readers now only come from one side. Darby Line didn't suffer a sudden collapse. It went through a slow retreat, one missing handshake at a time. One skipped visit after another. The cafe still sells pastries, but without the cross-border banter. The town hall still lights up, but the sound of bilingual laughter is gone. And for those who spent their lives in this borderless bubble, the truth has sunk in. Not every goodbye comes with fanfare. A town may still look whole, but if those who once casually crossed the line now turn away, the rhythm is already broken. Number 7, hloton. Have you ever been somewhere simply? Sometimes you stop somewhere just because it's on the way. Hloton, Maine used to be one of those places. Located at the northern end of Interstate 95, a highway running from Florida to the Canadian border, Hloton was the entry point into the U.S. for thousands of New Brunswick. Drivers each week, cars would line up at the border checkpoint, top off their tanks, grab some snacks, stop by Walmart, maybe get an oil change and then head on. No one came to visit Hloton, but everyone passed through. And then, suddenly, they didn't. Not because Hloton disappeared from the map, but because it vanished from people's routines. Starting in early 2025, vehicle crossings through the Hloton port of entry dropped by more than 68% year over year, according to the U.S. Bureau of Transportation Statistics. There were no bans, no announcements. Canadians simply changed their routes. They picked more remote crossings to dodge red tape, or they skipped the drive entirely, ordering online instead and picking up their packages in towns like Calais or Bangor. Those towns offered better services, more variety, fewer border complications. And so Hloton, once thriving from sheer convenience, was no longer on the way. The signs still flash, the discount flags still wave, but the traffic has vanished. A gas station that once operated 12 pumps now runs only 4. Walmart and Martin's, which once sold wholesale quantities to Canadian buyers, downsized their inventory. Parcel depots, once overflowing with Amazon boxes, began discussing closure. The biggest fear wasn't about money. It was about being forgotten. Residents struggled to make sense of it. There was no warning, no breaking news, just a slow realization. One day, no one asked for directions. Then parking lots stayed empty on weekends. It felt like a train station still lit up, but with no more trains coming. For those in shipping, repair shops, and package delivery, it was a sharp cut. not from competition, but from irrelevance. The route shifted, and Hloton became a bend in the road, a place skipped by a small GPS adjustment. Now, on quiet afternoons, store signs still shine. Lights flicker on. But the Canadian drivers don't come anymore, and the people here who once believed being in the right spot was enough have come to understand location only matters until the world chooses a different direction. Number 8. Msina. Msina isn't a tourist hotspot or a well-known destination. But for many Canadians from Cornwall, Ontario, it used to be a routine weekend getaway. They'd come to fill up their tanks, browse through Walmart or Target, stop by Hearthaven Mall, and head back before dinner time. The prices were better, the variety wider, and the border crossing wasn't too much trouble. That steady traffic kept Msina's economy humming. Then, almost quietly, Canadians stopped coming. No bans, no outrage, just a shift in habits. Since early 2025, vehicle traffic across Msina's international bridge has dropped by over 70%, according to U.S Customs and Border Protection. The savings aren't what they used to be. The Canadian dollar doesn't stretch as far, and border checks became a hassle. So Canadians decided it wasn't worth the trip anymore. That decision had swift consequences. The unraveling didn't begin with small shops, but with the giants. Walmart closed. Target shut down. The big signs that once signaled Msina had enough demand to support national brands were turned off without warning. Locals still needed groceries. Essentials didn't go away, but the stores did. Those with transportation began driving 30 minutes or more to neighboring towns. Those without, seniors, single parents, low-income workers, were left uncertain, caught between rising need and shrinking access. Msina wasn't poor enough to qualify for major assistance, but it also wasn't wealthy enough to attract new investment. What upset residents most wasn't the loss of a building, it was the quiet. No press releases, no town meetings, just the realization that the places they thought would always be there had vanished from the regional shopping map overnight. Msina had always relied on its proximity, close to Canada, close to a border bridge, with just enough retail to feel recognized. But that kind of relevance depends on traffic. And when Canadians stopped crossing, the foundation cracked. A system built around visitors simply collapsed without them. Now the town still stands, but it feels like an overlooked gap between two more active zones. Among the empty storefronts and faded signage, people are beginning to understand. Staying in place doesn't mean you'll keep being served. Sometimes the ones who stay are the first to be left behind. Number 9. Port Angeles. Port Angeles was never a central highway stop or a border mega-hub, but it had something unique, a route to the ocean and a personal link to Canada. Each day, the Blackball ferry from Victoria, British Columbia, would arrive, bringing steady crowds, not for bulk shopping, but they used to come just to stroll the boardwalk, sip coffee by the ocean, browse cosmetics or clothing shops, maybe grab a phone charger and then catch the ferry home. For years, locals grew familiar with the rhythm of the ferry from Victoria, like the tide. It came and went, regular and reliable. They believed it always would. Until it didn't. There was no disaster, no border dispute. Canadians simply stopped coming. Since early 2025, passenger traffic from Victoria to Port Angeles dropped by over 64%. According to data from the Port of Port Angeles, ferry ticket prices climbed, border checks became stricter. And for many Canadians, the things they once came here for, discount beauty stores, outlet clothing, cozy cafes, were now easily available at home. Why cross the water to visit a mirror of their own city? And so the ferry, once a steady lifeline, began losing riders. No flood of closed signs, no major shutdowns, just quiet adjustments. Shops opened fewer days. Restaurants shortened their menus. A couple of small hotels stopped accepting weekend guests. Locals who once cleaned rooms, gave tours, or ran little kiosks turned to delivery apps, part-time shifts, or gave up entirely. But the biggest shift was in the atmosphere. A harbor town, once preparing daily for guests, had to adapt to being overlooked. Port Angeles is still beautiful. The water still sparkles. The docks still sway in the wind. The sunset still turns the harbor gold each night. But the lights along the boardwalk, once beacons for visitors from the north, are now just soft glows for no one. No footsteps, No return trips. And under that fading glow, the town saw the truth. You don't have to be ruined to be left behind. Sometimes all it takes is being forgotten. Port Angeles didn't crash like a closed-down factory. It faded slowly. Like a cafe with its door open but no customers. Like a clock that still ticks but no one checks the time. The people here once believed that natural beauty, ocean access, and international connection were enough. But now they know, connections, if not nurtured, don't break. They vanish, like steam fading from a ferry window. Number 10, Pambina. If Port Angeles was once about the view and rest, Pambina, North Dakota, was never about staying. Canadians came. Pambina, North Dakota, was never about sightseeing or leisurely shopping. It existed for a single purpose, to serve as a parcel pickup hub for Canadians. For more than a decade, residents of Winnipeg and small businesses across Manitoba treated Pambina like an unofficial warehouse for American goods. They crossed the border for Amazon deliveries, eBay finds, car parts, household supplies, items that were too costly or hard to get in Canada. No tourists came, just a continuous stream of cars. Pull in, stop, turn around. The entire local economy revolved around this rhythm. Massive parking lots, logistics depots, and parcel pickup centers filled the town. FedEx, UPS, Amazon operating nearly around the clock. Fancy cafes weren't needed. All that mattered was the endless flow of packages. And then it stopped. In 2025, the Canadian dollar weakened. Customs regulations tightened. Import declarations became more detailed, more frustrating. Consumer groups like Winnipeg Deals began advising followers, "Skip Pambina, it's not worth the trouble anymore." Within months, traffic through the Pambina-Emerson crossing dropped by over 72%. According to the Canada Border Services Agency. But this wasn't just a drop in visits. The entire supply chain was restructured. Canadians stopped relying on Pambina. One Amazon-affiliated logistics center shut down. FedEx scaled back. UPS operated just 2 days a week. Dozens of independent parcel businesses closed up, signs removed, gates locked, driveways gathering dust. The once busy warehouses went silent, cold as the plains around them. Pambina had no backup plan, no other industry. No factories, no major commerce, just package pickup. And when that ended, Pambina vanished from the logistics map. What unsettled locals wasn't just losing money, it was being forgotten. No one made an official announcement. No memo said Pambina was no longer needed. But when no one came back, the message was clear. The depot lights still flicker at night, not because they're in use, but because no one's turned them off yet. Once a quiet but vital cog in the machine, Pambina is now just a name blowing through frozen fields, where a few elderly residents still unlock their doors in the morning, waiting. But no one's arriving. The heartbeat of this border town hasn't stopped from injury, but from indifference. 10 American border towns are quietly fading, not because of disaster, not because of war, but because a familiar neighbor stopped crossing the line to shop. That's the paradox. The very proximity that once gave these towns purpose has become their greatest vulnerability. When an entire community depends on people who don't live there, even one shift in direction can bring it all down. Maybe it's time for these towns and for America to rethink what it means to stand on your own. But who will begin? How long will it take? And if this keeps spreading, could your city be next? If you found this video helpful, remember to like and subscribe. This analysis is based on current data and independent observations. It is not a forecast of certainty, nor is it meant to cause alarm.